Millions of people stroll through Central Park every year, but almost no one knows that an entire neighborhood was buried beneath it. A thriving Black community wiped off the map and nearly erased from history. To understand how that happened, we have to go back nearly 2 centuries to a New York City that looked nothing like today. In the early 1800s, the city was crammed into the narrow streets of Lower Manhattan. The noise, the stench, and the poverty pushed thousands into desperate living conditions. For free Black families, many newly emancipated, after New York's slow, decades-long abolition of slavery, life downtown was especially dangerous. Competition for work created deep racial tension. Violence against Black families became common, and survival meant constant fear. But Uptown was different. In the 1820s, it wasn't skyscrapers and apartment blocks. It was farmland, hills, and wide-open countryside. And in 1825, that land went up for sale. For one man, Andrew Williams, it was the chance of a lifetime. He purchased 3 lots of land, a decision that would spark the birth of a community the city never wanted remembered. Williams' land purchase sent a message. Safety and stability could be found outside the chaos of downtown. Word spread quickly. Black families who could afford it followed his lead, buying plots of their own and laying foundations for homes. This was the birth of Seneca Village, a neighborhood stretched between what's now 82nd and 89th Street. It was more than just a place to live. For Black New Yorkers, owning property meant political power. At that time, Black men could only vote if they held land. Seneca Village gave them that chance: the right to own, the right to vote, the right to shape their futures. By the mid-1800s, the village had nearly 300 residents. Census records list shoemakers, domestic workers, laborers, waiters, and teachers. They weren't elites, but they weren't destitute either. They were building something rare: a safe, self-sufficient, property-owning Black community. Over the next 3 decades, Seneca Village grew into dozens of homes, 3 churches, and a school for Black children. For families who had lived in fear, this was freedom. But what made Seneca Village even more extraordinary was the way it bridged divides. As the village flourished, Irish and German immigrants began settling alongside Black families. And instead of conflict, something unusual happened: integration. Church records reveal baptisms where Black and white families stood side by side, cemeteries where they were buried together, even marriages that crossed racial lines in the 1800s, a rarity almost unheard of. In a time when America was fractured by segregation and prejudice, Seneca Village quietly showed that integration wasn't impossible. It was happening in the heart of Manhattan. This was more than just survival. This was a vision of community decades ahead of its time. Families of different backgrounds working, living, and worshiping together. But outside the village, New York was changing. And powerful men had already begun eyeing their land. By the 1850s, New York's population had nearly quadrupled. The cramped streets of downtown could no longer hold everyone. The elite feared the entire island would drown under brick and concrete. Their solution? Build a grand park. Wealthy businessmen and politicians, many freshly returned from Europe, wanted to mimic the wide boulevards of Paris and the lush gardens of London. They demanded a park that could give New York lungs space to breathe, and a monument to rival the old world. In 1853, the state authorized the creation of Central Park, spanning 750 acres. But there was one problem: the land wasn't empty. About 1,600 people lived there, and right in the middle stood Seneca Village. To the families who had worked for decades to build stability, the park's promise of progress was nothing less than a death sentence for their homes. And so the city launched its next move: reshape public opinion and make Seneca Village disappear before it ever vanished from the land. Newspapers led the charge. Articles dismissed the residents as squatters, painting their homes as ramshackle shanties. Some reports described them as people of low character, feeding the image that the land was wasted on them. But the truth was different. Census records proved high literacy rates. Archaeologists later uncovered porcelain dishes, Gothic-patterned ironstone, and even toothbrush fragments, rare markers of middle-class life. These weren't the possessions of squatters. They were the possessions of families building stability. Still, the smear campaign worked. By 1856, pressure mounted. Some landowners fought back, filing objections, even battling in court. But the outcome was already decided. The city invoked eminent domain, seizing the land in the name of the greater good. Families were forced to leave. Churches and schools were demolished. By the time Central Park's construction began, Seneca Village had been erased from the landscape. In just a few years, paths were cut, lakes dug, and thousands of trees planted. Where children once walked to school, there were now winding trails. Where families worshiped together, there were manicured lawns. Central Park was hailed as an urban masterpiece, a symbol of progress. But its beauty came at the cost of silence. Seneca Village vanished not just from the map, but from memory. For over a century, New Yorkers wandered the park, unaware of the community buried beneath their feet. The story wasn't taught, wasn't celebrated, and barely survived in the historical record. Generations came and went without ever hearing the name Seneca Village. It was as if it had never existed. But history doesn't stay buried forever. In the 1990s, researchers began piecing the story together, tracing census data and land deeds that revealed the truth. Then, in 2011, archaeologists unearthed the first undeniable evidence. From the soil of Central Park came fragments of porcelain, combs, smoking pipes, even parts of toothbrushes, objects that proved families here lived with comfort and dignity. Education records showed high literacy rates, and schools emphasized higher learning, signs of a community invested in its future. This was no slum. This was a thriving middle-class neighborhood erased for progress. Today, New York City is starting to acknowledge it. Exhibits inside the park now tell visitors about Seneca Village. Historians and activists see it as part of a larger American story. Displacement in the name of development. Highways carved through black communities. Hospitals, stadiums, and redevelopment projects bulldozing homes. Seneca Village was one of the first, but far from the last. Central Park today feels timeless, but beneath its beauty lies the memory of a neighborhood that once thrived until it was erased. Seneca Village isn't just Black history. It isn't just New York history. It's American history, a reminder that progress often comes with a cost, and sometimes that cost is entire communities silenced and forgotten. The park remains, the village is gone, but its story lingers in the soil, in the artifacts, and in the voices telling it once more. So the next time you walk through Central Park, ask yourself, how many other places look like empty land, but are really built on stories we've forgotten? Because if Seneca Village could vanish beneath the surface, what else is still hidden, waiting to be uncovered? And so, Seneca Village becomes another name on the long list of phantom towns, communities that once thrived, then vanished, leaving behind only whispers and shadows. These stories remind us that no place is ever just empty land. Every field, every street, every park has a past, and sometimes that past refuses to stay buried. This has been Phantom Towns, where history doesn't disappear, it lingers. Until next time, look closely, because the world around you might be built on stories long forgotten.